Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's resume and continue. So we're now on question 9, which effectively goes to the question as to, aside from site allocations, are there any other changes that the plan proposes to the Greenbelt? And of course, those also need exceptional circumstances. Are any justified? So if I can just get the council to say whether there are any other additional changes to the Greenbelt other than site allocations, and whether in your view any are justified. Thank you.
Thank you, sirs. So just specifically, again, just to go to our response to this particular question, and I won't repeat it in detail, our council response to matter, or to issue 2, question 9. All the proposed allocations, or all the proposed changes to the Greenbelt relate to growth and development specifically. By reason of that, 10 of our changes relate to allocations put forward in the plan, so it's been quite simply. And then we do have, just within our statement, a recognition and a point of clarity around one of those changes at TR01, Dunsley Farm and Tring, which just wanted to be exceptionally clear on that there is land that otherwise would become an island piece of Greenbelt. It would just stand alone as a small parcel. It doesn't really serve a function. As a result of the changes we're making, so for completeness, we were saying that we're going to take out that land also. It just relates to the cricket and recreational grounds to the northwest of the site. And then just one final point as well, if I can, with regards to changes. We did propose one additional change relating to a consented site in Kings Langley at Rectory Farm. It was a draft allocation in 2020. Won't talk too much about the narrative since then, but it was just for the fact that it had received permission. As a result of that, in considering the time that we were at when we finalised this plan, we thought it was prudent to make one additional modification, boundary change in that location as well. So I hope that's helpful. That's just trying to be simple, clear and effective without going into too much detail. Thank you.
It is. No, thank you. That's very helpful. So we've got 10 areas, site allocations. We've got a specific issue around TR01, Dunsley Farm. We have one additional change at Kings Langley, which relates to reflecting the extent of development that's been permitted. And no other changes reflecting, say, permissions or things won on appeal?
We had thought about the position, but I think reflecting even the most recent statements that we've submitted and reflecting things are constantly changing and evolving. We didn't want to kind of muddy the waters by adding additional elements, to that on a rolling basis. I think perhaps it may be something we may look at as a, well, again, subject to your view and recommendation. But, we were, in light of the kind of the approach we took to Kings Langley, the one site in Kings Langley, if you felt it, important, we wouldn't disagree with that approach to consider any other sites that may come forward, just for the interest of, adding clarity and effectiveness with regards to maybe some of these settlements and the settlement boundary.
Thank you very much. So I know there's certainly one nameplate up of people that may want to suggest, venture comments on this question. Any other comments other than Mr. Bainbridge? Okay, Mr. Bainbridge, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. You'll both appreciate the site that I'm referring to, which is the Greenbelt, west of Redbourne. It's an interesting one because we're not seeking the Greenbelt alteration west of Redbourne, east of the M1 motorway for the purposes of local housing need. or considerations of unmet need or what have you. And it really does come down to the so what question, which is quite often the case when it comes to planning for development. So what? The fact that Dacorum Borough Council has chosen not to review the Greenbelt and take out land in that location, which partly adjoins the proposed allocation west of Redbourne, but which sits in St Albans, the question is, well, so what? And our point really is it would just make it more comprehensive. It would be a defensible boundary. We do accept there could be a consideration of timing because, of course, Dacorum Borough Council don't have the comfort knowledge, whatever terminology, as to how the St Albans local plan has progressed. So one could say, on their behalf, they might say they'd like to wait and see what happens with St Albans. But we just genuinely feel there's an opportunity here for Dacorum to perhaps give some consideration to whether they feel it is worth a review or a further assessment of the Greenbelt boundary east of the M1, west of Redbourne. But our case really is just under the test of soundness justified. I think it would be overstating it to say that this local plan is not sound because they haven't taken that land out of the Greenbelt. So I'm just trying to be very open and clear with everyone. We did feel that perhaps the council was slightly sympathetic to the case from the comments made yesterday, and maybe were willing to consider whether there's a position to sort of revisit this going forward. So I'm obviously happy to respond to any further points, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Thank you. Let's go to the council.
Thank you. We'll bring Ms Mitchell in just briefly on a little point of detail regarding the site selection process on this. You will see probably from the evidence today, just without going into too much detail, we set our approach back in 2016 with regards to the stage 2 study, having regard to the emerging strategy and how the study has been informed by our strategy rather than the strategy of other authorities. So I don't want to go back and dwell too much upon what I said on that, but I just think it's important. And then we also talked about, just before lunch, about, it was quite dated, to what extent we needed to review and look at it again. And I responded to that particular point also. So it's just kind of on that. And referring back to what I'd said on day one, we are in just a very kind of unique position, and that you're going to seeing this site from two slightly different angles, I guess. And without discussing, sites in particular, we are sympathetic to the principle of this. Reflecting on the point about VSE earlier and applications, I don't want to dwell upon the applications process in any way. That's just it's outside of my remit. Nevertheless, what might constitute very special circumstances if one bit was removed and one bit wasn't, I think is something that maybe the councils would need to consider as well. But I think the overarching point here is I think we've had the discussions with St Albans on this. St Albans had informed us, we have taken it into account, which Ms Mitchell will just elaborate briefly on. But yes, I think we recognise, common sense approach to plan making if we can on this. I don't want to interfere with the examination of St Albans plan and the strategy around Redbourne or indeed any other settlement in their area. That's not my position to do, but ultimately, myself and the councillor are mindful that, if you were to consider progressing that plan positively relating to that site or any such areas, I'm sure we'd be open to, any recommendations that just make sure that we square that circle if needed. I hope that's helpful. But
it's a very, very fair perspective, and of course we have got site B3, haven't we, as St Albans, where we'll keep this in mind. So thank you. That's a very fair perspective. Yes, Ms Mitchell.
I was just going to point you guys in the direction of, again, it's matter to Appendix A, and it's page 88, where these three parcels of land were considered through the site selection. One thing that I realised I didn't mention to you is that we have also published an interactive map on our examination library of all of these HELA sites, which includes their references. I just thought I'd make sure that you've got that noted as well, so you can cross-refer between the documents and the references. So that maps with the other site selection evidence.
Thank you. That's handy, and I can see on that map that it's considered in 3 HeLa sites?
We received this site promotion. There were 2 different promoters, 3 parcels of land, separate parcels of land, but they've all been considered in the same way. They've promoted to us in 2023. But we've said it's not for the consideration, or you can't consider the progression of the St Albans local plan as through our sustainability appraisal.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Okay.
Sorry, just in terms of probably a question for Mr. Bainbridge, just remind me. You mentioned it this morning. What is your client's position with that parcel? What is it intended for?
Thank you, sir. The current master plan does not identify residential parcels on that small northern triangular bit of land. And you might have reference to that extract plan, which is within our hearing statement. That's likely to be green and blue infrastructure and possibly noise attenuation features, possibly some surface water drainage. There is also the larger triangle of land, which is which obviously you're familiar with, which is a landowner which my client Richborough are working with as well. And there might well be intentions to look to master plan that area, which would quite naturally fall towards being residential led also. But of course, that's in Dacorum. It's not in St Albans. I'm not making the case for residential on that triangle, the larger triangular bit of land. It just feels more comprehensive if it could be given consideration. But we do appreciate this is not about meeting LHN in Dacorum or cross-boundary or unmet needs. It's just that there will be a cross-boundary planning application. Part will be Greenbelt and part, if St Albans is successful, and then part will be taken out the Greenbelt as an allocation.
So are you trying to say there's an argument for effectiveness that the site needs to be considered as a whole rather than the sort of cross-boundary part in, part out of the Greenbelt?
I wish I put it so well myself, so that's exactly the point. Thank you.
It's a difficult one to counsel. I appreciate it. It is in the Greenbelt, as we sit here in St Albans Greenbelt. We haven't got to, I don't know if you're aware, but we haven't got to the sort of Redbourne day, if you like, on that examination. So we haven't actually been able to sort of even discuss or sort of debate that site yet. So I think we're probably in a similar situation as to where the council's at now in terms of, the St Albans part is in the Greenbelt and we are yet to consider it. I think all I would say is that as matters move forward, then we would obviously encourage the council and participants to just sort of keep up to date and think about it. And if there is a discussion to be had in the future, we don't know, around, I think Mr. Leyden said some sort of common sense approach and some sort of effectiveness and holistic view of this site and not ended up with little parcels and islands of land in the Greenbelt, then we would certainly encourage the 3 of you, and I include St Albans in that, really to have that discussion. But as we stand here today, or sit here today, at least it's too early because we haven't even considered that Redbourne site.
And also, I think that's fair. And it's something that I maybe was slightly evasive of, that we'll keep it in our mind, because obviously that site, B3, is very controversial in Redbourne when we haven't, we just haven't got there in that programme. So, okay. Thank you. So that brings us on to issue 3. Exceptional circumstances. Now, this is what we've been talking about all today, pretty much, and to some extent yesterday, to do with the settlement hierarchy and the site selection, and to some extent as well on the Tuesday to do with the duty to cooperate and the engagement with other people, other authorities. So the question is more of a mop-up: do exceptional circumstances exist? Now, I think we're fairly well cited on different people's views around the table as to whether that's a binary yes, no, or yes, maybe, or yes, and. So really, I would like everyone here, I'd encourage everyone to treat this as an opportunity to say anything in relation to the Greenbelt that moves the debate on, that you haven't already said in your representations and that you haven't yet had the chance to say. Because this is the crux of the matter as far as we're concerned. Do exceptional circumstances exist? Any comments? I know it's after lunch, but so someone try. Okay, there. Okay, 1, Ms. Cheetham. 2, Mr. Pichon. Will 1, 2. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity to just sort of sum up what we've put in our statement and some of the issues that we've spoken about today. The Greyfield Residents Association do not believe that exceptional circumstances can be justified until a more thorough examination of the potential of previously developed land has been undertaken. They take particular issue with the fact that no explanation is given as to why brownfield public land has been discounted, why brownfield sites have not been allocated before releasing the Greenbelt, and that there are potentially unexplored options beyond the borough boundaries. And we contend that these are all critical to the tests of exceptional circumstances as set out in paragraph 146 of the MPPF. And on wider Greenbelt matters, the GRFA are concerned that sites making a weaker contribution to the Greenbelt should have been prioritised for allocation. There's also concerns around the HELA and the figures in the HELA being inconsistent and in some areas unreliable. And, Dacorum have made inconsistent decisions about the weight to be attributed to a site's contribution to the Greenbelt, and our evidence for that is in our hearing statement. We've also heard from Dacorum Borough Council that they've had to find sites that are suitable, achievable and deliverable. When we've looked at the planning practice guidance, we're advised that the suitability of sites must take into account strong reasons for restricting development, and they cite the PPG sites Greenbelt as the first reason for such a restriction. The HELA is clear that many of the sites are identified as availability unknown, and we're still not clear as to the steps that Dacorum Borough Council have taken to establish that availability. The site selection process is unclear, and Greyfield Residents Association believe that Dacorum should carry out these necessary investigations of site availability before rushing to release the prime Greenbelt sites. And we're concerned that the site allocation process appears to have been developer-led, with too much emphasis placed on achievability and deliverability over and above the need to protect the nationally important Greenbelt.
Thank you very much. A concise summary there. I will come to the council. We'll hear from Mr. Pichon first. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to further add that we've Kings Langley District Residents Association with the Parish Council have submitted a written response to this, where we have given our views on this, but I just wanted to add a bit to it that I haven't heard so much the word today of coalescence. And we were part of the London Green Belt, coming out. So there is concern, certainly within the Kings Langley, among the residents and parish council, that coalescence is an issue that we are really, really concerned about, which was highlighted and worsened with the development our colleague there, Ronan, mentioned at Rectory Farm. And we feel very strongly that with the expansion into Apsley and the expansion coming through and touching into, across Nash Mills, and then towards into Kings Langley, that the development is causing coalescence and sprawl. And I think that we wish to register our concern and to say that this plan, we need to be reassured that our views will be taken account of, and that coalescence is a real issue for us, and we'd like to bring it to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, and certainly I can reassure you that your view very much will be taken into account by us. Okay, anything the council would like to say?
I think just a very, very short point, if I may, just with respect to Mr. Pichon's comments there, and I think we agree in many respects with the issues of coalescence. We understand that and respect that. I think particularly with regards to the settlement of King's Langley, I just want to kind of reiterate that the plan itself, beyond that permitted site, is not seeking to allocate any specific sites within the settlement of King's Langley itself. That's notwithstanding the view with regard to maybe other sites that may be more related to Hemel at Apsley. But yeah, it's just to reiterate, I think, yeah, that we do kind of share the view that coalescence is an important factor.
Sorry, if I could just add one point. In 2002, yes, 2001, just prior to COVID, we commenced a neighbourhood plan, and our boundaries were made very clear with agreement with the council, and you know where those boundaries are, and therefore that's why we are concerned about coalescence. Thank you.
Can I just pick up this point, actually? It's in your hearing statement. So, Rectory Farm, Kings Langley, was a previous draft allocation, but isn't in the submitted plan. Is that correct? So it's not in the submitted plan, but the submitted plan does seek to take the land out of the greenbelt.
Yeah, just on clarity on that, just to be explicitly clear, it's not an allocation, but it is a commitment, and a commitment reflected within the supply figures for Kings Langley. So when we look at the commitments in strategic policy H1, the table that sets out commitments, allocations and windfalls, that Rectory Farm site is there as a commitment, reflecting the fact it's received planning permission as a category A site. And that,
why do you seek to, because to amend the greenbelt, you need to demonstrate exceptional circumstances. What you're saying is that there's exceptional circumstances in Kings Langley because this site's got planning permission, but there aren't exceptional circumstances elsewhere where sites have also got planning permission.
Sorry, I think we might be slightly replicating a discussion at the start of this with Mr. Bristow about, is there any other sites on appeals and granted? And I think that we had started the process and said, well, we got to this point with this particular site when we finalised the plan. And at each stage, we've seen another site and another site and another site. And we said, yeah, and we were kind of saying, well, rather than keep adding with each stage, oh, there's another site, oh, there's another site, we kind of saying, we're happy and we perhaps would like to have a chance to, ensure that settlement boundaries for particular settlements are as up to date and accurate as they can be. By extension of changes to the greenbelt. We started that process with Kings Langley and Rectory Farm. We haven't sought to introduce as we receive each new appeal and each new site. We said we would maybe welcome an opportunity at later sessions and maybe around discussions around settlements to maybe resurrect this discussion and say, well, is there any other sites that you might wish to consider at these settlements? Owing to the fact that they've received permission.
I was just trying to get into my head. Obviously, you've come to the conclusion that you're going to amend the greenbelt boundary, but you've not allocated it. Just trying to understand the reasons why. Because presumably it's a planning permission, it'll be a 3-year permission, it could lapse, but you've removed it from the greenbelt, so that site is forever and a day going forward, no longer in the greenbelt. So it's sort of that's got an element of permanence to it, and that's what the greenbelt's about. I'm just trying to understand why, if it's so important for you to amend the greenbelt boundary here, but it's not important enough to allocate the land for housing. I'm just trying to understand that concept.
I think what we tried to do was avoid a confusion around the difference between a commitment and an allocation within our supply tables. And I think my nervousness is if we said this is an allocation in our plan, but it's also received planning permission, we'd have to qualify that through maybe some footnotes and stuff. I think we wanted to just reflect the fact that it had permission, it had full permission, at the time. I think it's building out, I could be mistaken. But, it was the recognition that things progress. From my perspective, it has got the principle of development of residential development on the site has been determined. that is something I might just need to go back and maybe just respond. It is under, yeah. And by example of that, just we have Grange Farm as well. I think as an example, as an allocation in our plan, just by context, it has received planning permission. It too is under construction. You know, it's just a point in time thing. And a bit like you say, we kind of don't want to jump too much and say, here's a bunch of other sites, but we just need to just be mindful of this maybe as the examination progresses.
I think because it's under construction, I do sort of sympathise with that situation because, as you know, if a site's being built out, then clearly going forward, you don't want to be in a situation where as a council, whereas then you've got it within the green belt, a resident comes forward, wants an extension, it then gets very, very complicated. So I can appreciate that.
And sorry, and that's the only one, is it? That's the only instance since the policies or the proposals map or whatever it would have been called under the core strategy and the site allocations. That's the only instance where there's a change. Which seems surprising. Anyway, we can come back to it when we're talking a later stage of the examination, a later stage of the examination about commitments. But it's just a curiosity that there's a different treatment here, whereas there must have been quite a lot of development that's been undertaken since the previous policies map.
I think perhaps going back to Mr. Birkinshaw's point is that there are sites which have permission, but are they under construction? Have we got the evidence and the reasonable confidence that they are being built out rather than something that could still expire? Again, trying not to confuse everybody on this, but in terms of when we talk about the numbers in the plan and the supply, you know, a number of these sites on the edge of settlements, some of them are detailed sites with permission, but haven't started yet. Some of them are really making fast progress, as is the case with this particular one in Kings Langley. There are other sites that obviously since we submitted back in March, and you know, where we had our up-to-date position, and there's other sites that are coming forward and are receiving permissions, but we're obviously not at that stage where we're seeing that maybe spades in the ground.
I think I've just got one point as well. The adopted site allocations DPD also did make some bit, you know, but there was a map book as well. So it's not since the core strategy. That was 2017. We don't have a reference to that, and I'm afraid my internet connection's dropped, but.
Leave this one there. Yeah, I don't want to prolong it too much. If it's something that, you know, we're very clear now in terms of where everything falls and we know your position. Thank you. Ms. Beta, did you want to say something? And then I think that's the last. Yep.
Very, very briefly, CPRE Hearts really supports Dacorum's efforts to adopt a local plan so that development in the borough can be positively plan-led. That said, we would like to see more evidence of the environmental improvements other than just biodiversity that will be made on remaining greenbelt land in the borough.
Thank you. And that's a point I've noted for discussion on L81 in particular and potentially also on sites. But is there anything the council wanted to add beyond what they've said already? No? Okay. Right. Well, I think then I would thank.
Sorry, there was the question. There was a question so before lunch about the response from neighbours, and there was the email that said we're going through sort of reorganisation, this has been passed to somebody else, and I said, was that the end of it? And you said no, I just asked you, trying to find out just where that was.
Yeah, if I can, I think with the specific reference was around Buckinghamshire Council. They had a point. Ms. Mitchell came back and said they responded to our consultations in 2012, 2023, but also 2020. I believe you asked, you know, are they available or where can I find them? Just to reiterate, our response to matter 1, issue 1, question 5. If it's issue, is that right? Yeah, with regards to the duty of matter 1, it's appended as Appendix A and Appendix B to our response to matter 1, which is part of the information around duty to cooperate. We provided all the responses from neighbouring authorities to the 2020 consultation and the 2023 consultation.
Okay. So if that's all the substance, I thank everyone very much indeed for their contributions. Very good debate. Made some extensive notes, so thank you for that. We have a few administrative points, I think, to deal with, and these are principally things that have come out of discussion with the council, things we need to be clear on. None of them will come as a surprise as we've aired them openly. Do we want to have a couple of minutes break?
I think it's probably worthwhile. There's only a few matters arising from sort of this week. So you'll recall on day one, we talked about highways a lot. So I said those two main issues, highways and housing. And we talked about the issue of cumulative impact, and you sort of saying, well, we approached this with National Highways on the basis of our plan, and we sort of said, well, okay, well, yeah, but you've got Hemel Garden communities, there's some strategic cross-boundary matters there. And we asked, could you go away and flesh out and put some meat on the bones on some of the evidence with National Highways, in particular around cross-boundary cumulative growth. You talked a lot on day one about a lot of the good stuff you've done working with neighbouring authorities around Hemel Garden communities, the working partnerships you've got. I think what Ms Bristow and I said that we didn't have was some evidence to show that this issue of cumulative impact, obviously you and St Albans are both progressing, you know, the expansion of through Hemel Garden communities, that you'd grappled with that. And I think you'll recall I said, you know, it can be as brief as a couple of sides of A4, but just to show that you have grappled with that issue of the cumulative growth. And if you could obviously, through Louise, provide that to us, we'll take a view on that. We may do a very quick consultation on that just to seek people's views in the interest of fairness. But it was more fleshing out the points that you've made rather than massively introducing anything new on new evidence. So that was day one. Day two, so it's day 1 and 2, but mainly day 2, we talked about the sustainability appraisal, and we talked a lot about when the Reg 19 sustainability appraisal was done and how that differs slightly now because we're in a sort of acceptance that the housing requirement figure needs to change because of the plan period. And we talked about having to update the SA. But I also said you're going to have to update the SA to reflect all the main modifications anyway. So our advice and recommendation was, yes, you need to do that. So we talked about, you know, doing that as you have to do through the SA with an open mind. But rather than tasking you with doing that now, I think our position is you might as well just do that wholesale once you know exactly where you're going with sites and all the rest of it. That was on day 2. So that's a sort of a bit of a homework task for the future. And then a bit of a homework task for Mr. Bristow and I is to go away and digest all the things we've heard, mainly yesterday afternoon, but also this morning. And obviously we've raised it in session a few times now around where the trail goes cold really in terms of that final piece of the jigsaw. You referred to lots of different pieces of evidence and the SA, and we get to the SA where that says, well, we're looking at reasonable alternatives, but that's not really my role. It was more of a package. And it's that almost like site options analysis pro forma sheets of where people can go and say, I understand why the council has allocated, I don't know, sites in Berkhamsted, sites in Tring, wherever they are, and what the reasons were. So Ms. Bristow and I, we'll go away, and just because there's lots of evidence and lots of documents referred to, we'll go away and sit in a dark room and get our head around that. And we will then probably, I think, have to write to the council's director on exactly what we want you to do, because, you know, we're mindful there is a lot of information there, and we don't want to sort of task you with just regurgitating what you've already produced, because that's not going to benefit anyone. So we'll go away and we'll be hopefully quite directive and specific on what exactly we want. But I think it's fair to say, and I said it this morning, and everyone agreed with me, I think through their silence, that there is a bit of a missing gap there. There's a missing piece of the puzzle. And I think a lot of the reps and a lot of the concerns that people have raised are around that and the transparency. People can sort of understand, you know, a site's been allocated. Some people are going to support it, some people aren't. And there might be some judgments in there around what we as a council think is going to be harmful and what other people. But without having that, people can't start to understand why you've made those decisions. I think that's hopefully a sort of fair summary and synopsis of sort of people's concerns. And I think that cuts across both. I keep looking at this side of the room. Everyone swaps around today. All sort of residents were there and developers were there. So that cuts across both, I think, local residents and developers trying to understand some of those decisions. Have I missed anything?
I think that's very comprehensive from my perspective. I would just say on the cumulative impact, the work with National Highways as soon as possible on that, and I think you mentioned that,
I think,
because obviously we've got the joint Hemel Garden community session coming up. So
I think in terms of where the examination goes from here, we've got, as I explained on day one, the joint session on strategic matters around Hemel Garden communities. So Tom's right, on the cumulative highways information, we're not looking for masses of detail there. So if that can be done sort of ASAP, we will then go forwards and we will hold the joint session, which is on Tuesday, 21st of October, I think off the top of my head. So we'll go forwards for those who are sort of following the examination. That's the next step. On Tuesday, I then said that stage 3 will probably logically follow around sort of November, December time. We'll have to take a view on precisely when that is, because we will probably need, well, you'll need to receive our direction and you'll need to provide some information on the site selection. I don't want to go into a hearing on the 1st of November, let's say, on, I don't know, let's just pick one, Tring, and people still sit there and say, well, we don't really know how Tring came to be in the plan. And so I think we need to bottom that out before we then go. Otherwise, we're just going to waste everyone's time, quite frankly. And, we need to, deal with things efficiently. So let's go forward. If you can work on the highways information as soon as possible, we'll go forward. We'll have the strategic day on Hemel Garden communities on the 21st for those who are coming. The rest of that week is then St Albans parts of Hemel Garden communities effectively. And then if you can then get the information to us on the site selection process, we can then do that. Probably will consult on it in some way, shape or form. And then hopefully we can then move forward to hearings on sites, so specific sites, with everyone slightly more informed as to what the plan is. Does that make sense? Is that fair? Yeah.
There's only one further point, that there were a number of points you raised, I think mostly quite specific, as an alert for future. We'll come back to it. So we've, at the moment, other than being warned that we're coming back to it, we're not doing anything on it. Not quite sure what we would do, but you've very kindly alerted to some questions on that. The exception to that was you flagged up the potential to add something to the supporting text of policy H1 in relation to the need for older persons accommodation. So it's only really to seek clarification, because that wasn't a warning or an alert.
It is. There will be a session on sort of housing needs where we will talk about, it'll probably be a morning session where we talk about affordable housing, we'll talk about mix of housing, we'll talk about older persons housing. So it's a bit of a sort of a nod to that session as to having a think about, because I think it was Miss Reed made the point that the plan sort of intimates around needs for sort of specialist housing and older people's housing, but then doesn't really say anything. So that was more of a sort of nod to that session. You don't have to do anything, well, we don't need anything from you. It's more start to have a think about that, start to have a look at your evidence. What does your evidence say? And is there a logical link between your evidence and your plan? Or maybe there's not, I don't know. But that was more of a sort of flag for the future.
Okay, well that's helpful clarification.
Yeah, we're not looking for anything.
Don't need to do anything just yet. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, just to sort of briefly sort of set out the sort of process and where we go? And I think that's sort of the task, especially around the sort of site selection, I think does reflect a lot of what we've been talking about and a lot of what people have said. Is there anything else, Mr. Bright?
Thank you. It was just to confirm that the extra documents you're requesting will be loaded up onto the portal for us all to see, or are they only for your eyes only?
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Anything like that will be added to the examination website, and obviously depending on what the council produce, and that's why I said Mr. Bristol and I really need to just go away, and because a lot of this is actually, I think, as Mr. Layden's pointed out over the last couple of days, and I think I said this yesterday, a lot of it sounds like it's there, it's just sort of scattered around basically, and it might be a case of pulling it together. So yeah, absolutely. You know, as I said, we will always ensure that anything like that is always uploaded and it'll be made available for everybody. We may even sort of do a quick sort of consultation to seek people's views on it. Again, we don't know, so we don't know what it's going to say. But no, anything like that, keep an eye on the website, but also you'd be sort of emailed or contacted through Louise if there was an opportunity to comment. Obviously, you've participated as part of these hearings, so we'd be looking to seek your views on that. But yeah, keep your eye on the website for any updates. Louise, have I missed anything? Is there anything you want to add? No? Anything from the council? No? Okay, well, thank you all for your time and thank you all for your participation and engagement this week. For those of you who are attending on the 21st, we'll see you there. So just a note, so nobody turns up in this building. It is not in this building. It is in St Albans Council Chamber. So if you turn up here, we won't be here. So no, thank you all for your time and we'll adjourn there. Thank you very much.